Hey everyone, welcome back. This week we're going to be doing an assignment that has to do again with typography, but this time with an emphasis on texture and how to create different textures. And to do that, as you'll see, you're going to actually create a typographical portrait. There's a lot of different examples out there on the internet, and there's a lot listed in this week's module. So before you really start delving into the technical aspects of it, make sure you look at a lot of the examples. I want to give you some tools that we haven't talked about yet in Illustrator that may be helpful. You don't have to use any of these specific techniques, but just trying to move along, sort of thinking about different ways of using the program, and then you can employ them in the assignments if you see fit. So the first one is understanding a little bit more about text boxes and letter spacing and line spacing and linking of text boxes. So we're going to start just by making a simple text box and pasting in some text that I have on the clipboard. Now, what we understand is that this text is not an object, so we can't actually abstract or change the letter forms of them. We're dealing with it as a paragraph, but there's still a bunch of things that we need to know when we're dealing with it as a paragraph. One is justification, and this is fairly straightforward. Probably you might be familiar with it if you're familiar with word processing in Word. In Illustrator there's a few more because we can fully justify, which you may be familiar with. You see that a lot in newspapers sometimes, but there's more options in your paragraph window. If you're looking for how to get to the paragraph window, you can find it under Window, Type, Paragraph, and we're also going to use Type Character in a second as well. So you can explore the different types of justification: left, center, right, justified with the last line going to the left, justified with the last line in the center, justified with the last line on the right, and fully justified. These may not be useful for this particular assignment, but it's really a good thing to know that you have the option of doing once you start working with paragraph type in in designs. Now another thing is understanding that you can link. If I make a paragraph small enough that this little red plus sign shows up, that means that there's text outside of the box that we're not seeing. And what I'd like to show you is my ability to make another shape. Let's say, let's make it interesting. We'll make it a star right there. I'm going to remove the fill from this star. And if I grab that plus sign, you can see that when I mouse over a path, it asks me if I want to drop the rest of the text into that path. If I say yes, and you can see that I actually can use the star shape as a receptacle and as an envelope, is what that's called, for the text. And I can still modify the star shape, making it bigger or smaller. And the text lives in that star shape. Now if I've still got extra text, I can click the plus sign again, and let's this time create a circle, remove the fill, and once again, there we go, asks me if I want to put the text into the circle, say yes, and there we have it. So the interesting thing about understanding text linking is that as I modify the size of one, it pushes the text into the other. So this is not only good for possibly using in this assignment if you wanted to link text together, but it's really great for laying out things like brochures, things where you have solid blocks of type paragraphs and you don't know how they're going to be laid out, you can link the paragraph forms. Okay, so that is paragraph linking. Now, important to understand also is when we move into the character window, there's a lot of different ways that you can think about how texture paragraphs can create texture. And a lot of that some of that has to do with the letter spacing and line spacing. So this is, of course, Helvetica. It's 10-point typeface size, and the letter spacing is set to 0. It's fairly normal, and line spacing is at 12, also pretty normalized. If we change the line spacing, you can see that you can tighten up the lines, and as you do that, it becomes a little bit less legible as you go. But it can be an interesting tool, creative tool, to turn type into texture. So suddenly that same paragraph becomes more of a textural element than a paragraph, but it is actually using those words. If we combine the paragraphs and layer them, you can actually get to a point where you're able to use layers of paragraph type to create shading. So now I want to talk about area type and envelope distortion. Two different ways of using a path to contain text. And you'll see this in the examples of the typographical portraits utilized, and maybe you'll wonder how they're doing it, and we can show you here. So I made a little path of a whale, and what I'm going to do is first of all remove the fill. I just have the shape of a whale that's a path. Now the first thing I can do is hold down the type tool and select area type, and if I mouse over my whale, I can paste that type that's been in my clipboard into the whale. Of course, it's got that tight letter spacing, so it's more textural right now, but you can see how that works. If I turn the whale, the type stays horizontal, and so that's how you use the area type tool. This could be any path, could be anything from a circle or square to any tracing that you've done. Now another method you'll see is envelope distort, and what this is basically we take a word, and we're going to create the word traditionally, and we'll make our word whale. Seems appropriate. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And choose just slightly more interesting font. Well, impact is not necessarily more interesting, but maybe a little bit more fitting for a whale. So what I want to do now is place the, you can see I'm able to select both the text and the whale itself. And what I want to do is make sure the whale shape is on top. So I select that shape, and I'm going to say Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. And this arrange function is really useful in shifting sublayers. If I folded down my layer 1, you could see that I actually have two layers, the path and the whale. And I can either do that through Object Arrange, or I can go down into my sublayer and actually physically bring it up. So either way, I need the path on top of the whale. And at this point, I'd like to select both, and I say Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Top Object. And that top object is, of course, the whale shape. And you'll see what's going to happen. It envelope distorts that text into the shape of the whale. So, it turned out in this case not to be totally legible, but you can see how that works. So that's envelope distort. The next thing I want to show you is type on a path. And if we move that down, and I just will show you basically use the pencil tool to make a quick path with no outline and no fill. Here I am. I'm going to use a pencil to make a simple wave pattern, and I'm going to apply type to this path. And to do this, we hold down the type tool and we select type on a path. And you're welcome to check out these other vertical type tools too. They're a little bit obvious of what they do, but they can be useful. Type on a path allows us to mouse over the path, and you see your cursor kind of changes at that point. And my cursor sits on the path, and if I, let's say I'm going to type the word, what kind of paragraph do I have? Oh, I'm on fully justified, so it's kind of an interesting effect. But as I type the word water, it's applying it to the entire wave that I've made. If I say left, water appears on the left, justified left. And let's just say that maybe I do want to have it fully justified. And that's what that looks like. If I center it, looks like so. You can also copy and paste. And maybe I would, in this case, choose a more handwritten font, and then I could, of course, apply this down, something like that. So that's type on a path. You can use it for any type of path. You can type on a square, you can type on a circle. It's obviously really useful for, in a lot of the portraits you'll see hair, strands of hair done in type, and that's done with type on a path. So there's one other really useful thing to know about type on a path. And that is that you might run into as you're working on it, and you might get a little bit stumped, and that is the options for it. And if we select piece of type that has type on a path, and we go into type on a path, type on a path options, and we preview them, you can get a sense of what the different options are. So flipping it basically puts the type on the opposite side of the path. That's important. And then if we flip it back, you can also align it to different ways, align it differently to the path. So right now the path is the baseline of the type, but if we made it in the center versus descender or ascender, this different alignment. I mean, baseline is the standard that I'm accustomed to using. So that is an important thing little tidbit, the type on a path options. And once again, you get to that by selecting the piece of typography and then going type on a path options. Okay, so today we've talked about area type on a path, envelope distort, and at the beginning we talked a little bit about linking paragraph boxes. So those are a few really useful tools for working into your typographical portraits. I'll also link a few other tutorials that might be helpful to you, and good luck.